Do we have free will, or is the world deterministic? What's the truth? I'm Marco Perri. Welcome to the Perri platform. Free will is a topic that's come up quite recently in debates I've listened to and ones that I've been a part of, and I find this topic to be very interesting and beneficial for people to truly get a grasp on. One thing I have to point out though is that with a topic like this, it's almost impossible to verify if you are correct. It really is just speculation and opinion because after all, we could just all simply be in the matrix and everything is a figment of your imagination, but let's assume that's not true and we do live in a real world with real consequences. What the free will debate tries to figure out is whether or not we as people have the ability to shape our future, or is it simply already laid out for us and we're just along for the ride? The two dominant train of thoughts here is on one side you have the people who advocate for freedom of will, and on the other side you have those who are deterministic. So let's lay those out real quick. Free will essentially boils down to a belief that you as a person have free choices that you can make right now that will then set off a chain of reactions that occur going into the future, and perpetually you are faced with new decisions for you to make. Nothing is already set out in stone, you craft your own future. Now, the other side is determinism. Essentially what they try to proclaim is that there is a grand scheme of cause and effect. Right now we are feeling the effects of one cause, and these things stem from even before we are born. Your destiny is laid out for you. There are things like your biology, things like your environment, things like your personality that you had no choice in creating, but they are given to you, and all these factors combined result in the you that you are experiencing today. And it will still be the you you're experiencing into the future, and you're simply just watching a show. All the things that are going to occur are a result of the progression of this one cause, and these are the effects that stem from it. Everything is laid out intricately, and all you can do is sit back and relax. And this, you could say, is very similar to a faith-based argument. Now, I think 100% in either direction, being 100% free will or 100% determinist, is likely to be wrong. They both have tidbits of truth in them. Here's the way that free will is usually presented in an argument. They'll say something along the lines of, how can it be that faith is going to play out how our lives turn when we have a choice right now? I'm choosing to be on this podcast. You are choosing to listen. You may have chosen not to listen. And from that point, your life could have been completely different one way or another. There was nobody who forced you to do that. That was your choice. You could have easily done something else with your time, but you decided to be here right now. And that itself is going to set off a ripple effect going to the future. These things were not preordained by any means. The free will side of the argument is pretty straightforward, but the determinism stances are quite interesting and there's a lot of nuance to them. There are people who are more diehard fans of it, and those who I would say are more centrist. So the more centrist determinists would say something along the lines of, well, although you may have decided to go ahead and listen to this podcast here, there are certain factors that you did not control, factors that were outside of your scope that led you to be more likely to do this. For example, when you were born, maybe something in your brain is hardwired to seek out audio information. Maybe at the same time, you were raised in an environment where audio became your preferred mechanism of consumption. Or maybe you were just walking home and one of your friends told you about this cool topic and you sought it out. The key here is that there are numerous external consequences and effects that played into your decision. It wasn't truly free. For it to be a free will decision, the argument is you would have to make that simply based off your own decision and your desire to do something, but there are other factors in the pot that we can't account for. We don't know to what degree your own personal preference played into this when the preference itself has been influenced by numerous other things, and at the same time, there are other qualities in there that play a part in your decision. We don't know the numbers. We can't make the claim that it was your free will per se. It may have simply been an influence, and that's the more centrist claim. There is a more extreme determinist argument that goes further than that. See, the first one still recognizes that you had a choice to make and you can make that choice, but some people make the claim that given these prerequisites, choice is simply an illusion. You were led to this and you had no play, no say, and no influence on that action. This was simply an effect that came from a cause, and you're just here along for the ride. It is part of the tour. You can see quickly where this more extreme notion goes into trouble. If you take away the agency of somebody, if you say that you don't actually have a choice, everything happening here has been laid out for you in advance and you're just doing nothing, you have no control over your actions, well, think about the law system. Think about criminals and evil doings. Quickly, you can't even blame people anymore for the actions that they take, and that's actually a tenet of the more extreme determinists. They say that you can't really pass blame on anybody for things they do because they don't really have control. They don't have free will. They've been led here either due to their environment, their neurological wiring, things that they can't control, and it was no free decision at all here. You can't establish guilt on that basis, and I would say that is false because we do have a decision, as I'm going to touch on in a little bit when I talk about my opinion. So, based on these two arguments here, you can kind of get the sense that they talk past each other to some extent. They can actually be true within each other if you take the more centrist claim and disregard the extremist one. So, free will is majorly concerned with all the possible courses of action available to you from now until infinity, and how if you make a decision at one point, it affects your future going forward and it rewrites it as you go. The determinist argument majorly analyzes the constraints that limit those courses of action. It looks at the constraints that limit how you make a decision, and if you go all the way to the extreme, they come to the conclusion that there really is only one outcome and choice is an illusion. But you don't have to go that far though. What if we use both of these ideas? The determinists are right in the sense where they point out that you as a person have had a lot of influence put on you that you have not created. You didn't create yourself. You're not the author of your own hardwiring or the way you think. You're simply an effect of a cause that we don't understand fully. Now, given that though, it's true that there are going to be limitations on the courses of actions available to you. It may even force you to develop a tendency. If you were grown or raised in a household that advocated for a particular theme, you may decide to latch onto that theme subconsciously. Or it may even be something deeper than that, just the way the neurons work in your brain. You may be attracted to a certain thing over another, but the fact of the matter is you still have a choice to make here. Even if you are heavily tilted towards one thing, or the path behind you is leading towards one thing, you always can make a swerve. You can change your destination even though it's hard. The determinists make the case that the deck is stacked against everybody basically. You are dealt a hand by life, and you are given it. Where free will comes into play though, is once you get that hand. Based on this hand, you have some choices to make. Your hand might suck. Your hand might be awesome, it might be mediocre, but you still have a way of playing that. There isn't just one fixed way you can lay down your cards. I'm going to go deeper into that idea in just a second, but first I want to talk about Sam Harris. He's a popular, what would you call him? A philosopher almost. He debates about these topics quite often, and he's very well educated, well versed on the subject. He says that he does not believe in free will at all, but he also does not subscribe to complete determinism either, which I find very interesting. I think the issue here is that most people would view the term free will as a word that describes our agency, your ability to make a choice, but Sam Harris, he uses the word a little bit differently. He frames it in a way that describes the creation of the factors that lead us right up to the moment of decision making. So in other words, we appear to not have free will because we don't know to what extent influences have affected us. For example, if we decide to go to the gym, what percentage of that motivation or decision making comes from a TV commercial, from family pressure, from inherent desires, and most importantly, the variable that we're concerned with, our actual will. Up to this point, he's correct, and he makes the case that we don't fully understand where the percentages lie. Maybe only 10% of the decision is our free will. Maybe 90% of it is influenced by external factors that we had no control over, and based on that, by the simple reason that we cannot determine if it was truly our will that led to our decision, we don't have it. That's the argument that he makes, but at the same time, he follows by saying this, that we do still have the ability to make a choice. For example, let's say you want to learn Chinese. You can't just sit down and not do anything and hope that one day things will play out in a way where you just magically get the knowledge. You have to go out of your way and make a decision to do that. See, with Sam, and I hope I'm not straw manning his argument. I hope to be Iron Manning it, where I make it as strong as possible. But based on the way he's presented it, it seems to me that Sam is concerned with what makes us want to make a decision, and in a vacuum, he doesn't think that it's in fact free because of all these other influences that are at play here. All the things that we can't account for that are toying with the way your mind is working. So, this view is compatible with consequences though, unlike the further extreme determinist arguments, I would say. Because Sam still believes in a choice. There is still agency within Sam's analysis. Although we don't fully grasp all these strings at play, you still ultimately make a call and you will need to be held accountable to that. Maybe it was not entirely a free choice, as he would say, that the starving man was made to take a loaf of bread, but we still can't succumb to petty crimes for the sake of society. He wouldn't say that anybody who commits a crime is guiltless and they should be let free, as some of the determinists would. It wasn't that the bread thief didn't have a choice per se, but the cards were stacked in a certain way and it was loaded in a certain direction that tipped heavily towards one outcome, towards one course of action. The difference between Sam and I, though, is that I would still call this free will, and here's where we differ. Now I'm going to get into my conclusion on the topic. In principle, we are somewhat similar. It may be a minor linguistic difference, but there is a difference here. To me, free will isn't defined or limited to these concerns of restrictions on decisions, and I feel like that's what Sam is really focused on. There are always criteria of influence at play with any decision. I accept these premises here. It seems to me, though, that free will is a level below that. It's simply tied down to two things and two things only. The first is the ability to think and envision at least two possibilities of futures or dreams or any course of action you want to take for yourself. The second criteria is the ability to choose for you which possibility to pursue. This is regardless of restrictions based on what may be influencing you in that decision. You don't have to have unlimited choices free of circumstances to have free will. I think this definition is where we differ. He may believe that you do have to have that. For me, all you need is at least two choices and the ability to make a decision. Everyone comes with baggage that influences them in a particular way. That is true. But there is one thing we all have with every action that we ponder. We can aim towards improvement, or we can settle for our current state, and that is a universal. There may even be a third option there. We can aim towards destruction, so you can go up, down, or you can stay the same. Now, of course, the degrees at which we individually can perform these series of escalations and de-escalations or stagnations varies depending on the person or situation, but these choices are always there, no matter what. You can have a proclivity towards one path, you may have a pull towards improvement or destruction or just staying the same, but you are never really doomed to it. Let's go back to that bread thief person example for a second here. If his situation is grim, as we can acknowledge that it is, he still has these choices available to him. He can aim for something higher. He can strive towards that. Maybe he can make $1 on that first day. Then maybe he can find a job for himself in the future, and then the future, his issue of not being able to feed himself, it can be remedied. Now, I'm not a fortune teller, and I'm not saying that it will be remedied, and that's a major distinction to make here. All I'm saying is there is a path that is possible. Even if the cards are stacked against him, maybe it's hard to get a job, it's hard to make that dollar, it's hard to do all of these things, and so he is drawn towards another choice of action. He's drawn towards the theft, but that is a downward motion for him. Because, or at the very best, it's a sedimentary one where he stays the same. If you get caught performing the theft, you go to jail, your life gets further destroyed and whatnot. If you don't get caught, you're stuck in the same place you are, and you are a hamster in a hamster wheel. These things are easier, and you could say that he's drawn towards them, but it doesn't mean he's damned. There is a choice possible here, and you might mock and laugh at him for simply striving towards $1, but in that vacuum, in his own personal circumstance, that is a success. That is something he can strive towards, that he can make a reality. And that's regardless of whether it's hard or not. You only become locked in once you start believing that you truly have no choice. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You can work towards unraveling the web that makes you favor a certain outcome. You can work towards readjusting your defaults. You can move upwards. That choice is possible in any scenario. This is one of the amazing things about life, the perpetual opportunity for improvement and advancement. Every day, life hands you a choice to do better for not only yourself, but for those around you. You are not destined to make a certain choice. You are free to decide for yourself what you want to strive towards. Of course, there are restraints on that. There are factors out of your control that are going to play with you and make you want to choose another choice. But strive towards that higher aim. This is what I think free will is all about. You have more than one possibility readily available to you at every corner of life. You have a choice. You can envision yourself doing something better. If you have to move some boulders along the way, it's still possible. Here's an exercise. Imagine where you can be 10 years from now if you take advantage of all these opportunities and you move towards a higher place. You can take baby steps at first, but they compound over time. I guarantee you that person 10 years down the road is in a better place than where you are right now, no matter who you are. And imagine this too. Where you could be 10 years down the road if you succumb to all your vices, if you aim downwards. That person, I guarantee you, is at the best case the same as you are today, and the worst case, just a complete abomination of your current self. That is free will. Now there are some implications of this. The first I find, once you understand and grasp these concepts, is that you are less likely to judge people harshly. Sam Harris and some of the determinists are right about one thing. There are a lot of effects that spawn from a cause outside of your control. A lot of people are just dealt a bad hand, a hand that they had no choice in making. They didn't make themselves prone to anger. They didn't make themselves prone to doing other things as well. But there's still a choice there. So you can reserve some judgment, but you'll be trying to lead people towards empowering themselves to make that choice. The second implication here is that we can better understand the factors that play into our subconscious so you can control them. Once you become aware of these things, there are some biological, environmental factors that play into my decision-making criteria that do limit me, you can begin to unravel that. You can undo the workings of those things on your psyche. And finally, the last thing here is that deterministic circumstances do stack everybody's deck. Everyone has a hand that was dealt to them. You did not pick where you were born, who you were born into, what you like to do, and all these kind of things that are just simply given. But you do have a say in how you play the cards you are dealt. And that is free will. So, that now brings me to the end of today's conversation. If you enjoyed the content, be sure to leave a review and share. And you can also find me on Twitter and Instagram at Perri Platform. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.